Which should you buy, Blanton's or Wild Turkey Kentucky Spirit? Let's find out. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bourbon Hutch, and thanks so much for joining me on this journey through the world of whiskey. So, today we've got two bottles, two single barrel options in front of us that I thought it would be really nice to compare. I wanted to explore and potentially start a new series on the channel where we just place different contenders against each other head to head and ask ourselves which one is actually worth the buy. I think there's so much whiskey out there that it can be difficult to orient yourself in the market. There's also an uptick in pricing on bourbon across the board, so it might be helpful to have a series where we talk through which bottles I'd recommend compared to others. If you're trying to make a decision within a certain category, which one to go after, maybe this could be helpful in making that decision. So let's start with a classic category, one that people know, one that people often hunt in, and that is single barrel options, more limited special single barrels from two major distilleries here. We've got Blanton's, the most well sought after bourbon in the world here. It is Buffalo Trace's sort of staple option that keeps the hype train going. It is 93 proof, if I'm remembering correctly. I think that's correct. And then usually available, I think the MSRP is $70 now, but you might have to pay somewhere in the $100 range to get a bottle of it. Also rare, difficult, hard to find. Then, as a kind of competitor in the same market, you've got a bottle that I've always had a hard time understanding its placement, but Wild Turkey Kentucky Spirit. What you've got here is a single barrel offering, 101 proof, just like the Wild Turkey 101, but bottled like rare breed. Just kind of an interesting one that fits in that $60-ish price point in most places, but fair to say it's pretty comparable to Blanton's in terms of price. Availability, very mixed on this. I've seen it flood my market at times and then be totally not findable for long periods, so very interesting. But again, yeah, you've got the rare breed, which is the barrel strength. You've got the 101, which is a classic staple. You've got Russell's Reserve single barrel at 110 proof, very robust. Then Wild Turkey Kentucky Spirit kind of sits in this interesting range of lower proof, yet single barrel option. In many ways, you could see it as Wild Turkey's attempt to do something like Blanton's and have a sort of competitor. So let's look into both of them. Let's see what their value is. Let's see what they bring to the table. And ultimately, I'll make a recommendation on if you have that $70 to $100, you're looking for something that's a little more special, which one should you go after? All right, so we'll start with Blanton's and we'll dig in. We'll compare them on the nose and then the palate. So one note is that my bottle of Blanton's I struggled with for a while. It really had this funky note that I just couldn't quite pin down and didn't love, but I've revisited it a couple of times recently and it's been growing on me. I think it's opened up a lot, so let's see. Citrus, orange citrus, light, honey, a little bit of spice, slight vanilla. It's more higher register notes, not a ton of those deep dark notes. I do have to dig into that a little bit. The nose doesn't quite jump out of the glass, but it's pleasant. Okay, and then Wild Turkey Kentucky Spirit on the nose. Okay, definitely taking a turn. We've got some darker notes, brown sugar, a darker berry note. Actually, I'd amend that. Maybe some berry, but black licorice. It's a distinct note I get sometimes on Wild Turkey, and this particular single barrel has it for sure. Yeah, licorice, a little bit of rye experience going on. But the brown sugar and a little bit of that Wild Turkey funk. I know it's not quite nutty, but a little funky oak and brown sugar. Definitely a funk oak experience there. Okay, let's go in on the palate and dig in there. That's what will give us the most information. So Blanton's on the palate. Cheers. All right. So a lot of the nose transfers over. Honey, orange peel and orange citrus, slight vanilla, just a touch of spice. What's really lingering for me is a little bit of like a creamsicle honey, but really that vanilla and orange citrus. It's quite solid. It does feel lacking. And I don't say that because it's fun to criticize Blanton's. I honestly only have one single barrel. I bet there's others that are even, more special or justify that special range that people put this in. But I just feel like it doesn't have a backbone. It almost has in the mid palate for me like an emptiness. Front end of the palate, nice and pleasant. Back end of the palate, kind of sweet and lingering. Medium finish. But the mid palate just doesn't really take me anywhere. It just feels flat a little bit. So it's been my biggest criticism of Blanton's for most of the time that I've tasted it and had it and compared it to other things. I do think it's still there, just a little bit flat, especially on the mid palate where you're looking for a bigger burst of flavor. But overall approachable and pleasant and sweet. It's very interesting, how this Blanton's is the original single barrel, kind of revolutionized the approach to whiskey in terms of making it more exclusive and getting that single barrel variation, special bottling. The presentation is obviously top notch. The marketing around it is crazy. Buffalo Trace might have the best marketing department in the world, the way they generate hype around their products. But the presentation, the Blantons, you can collect all the letters. It's just the aura around this bottle is something that everybody seems to want, whether it's, the classic tater who wants the just what everybody says is the most special bottle, all the way up to a sophisticated collectors who know that you can get great Blantons and other parts of the line are great. But for me, standard experience here, solid, but just a little bit lacking. All right, let me get some water, then we'll go over to the Kentucky Spirit. Okay, so again, this bottle that I've struggled to understand its place in Wild Turkey's own lineup, but when you put it right up to Blanton's, it kind of makes sense. Like, how does this compare? All right, cheers. On the palate, Kentucky Spirit. Okay. That Wild Turkey, funky oak, and that black licorice really come through on the palate. A little bit of a cherry as well. Definite cherry. And then brown sugar. This one has more depth. It has more robust presentation on the palate for sure. Kind of envelops your palate a little bit and doesn't have that what I'd call lacking quality. What I will say though is the funkiness and the black licorice I do not think are going to be up everybody's alley. I particularly enjoy it. I love black licorice candies. Big fan of it's called Good and Plenty's. This reminds me of that a little bit, with the like coating on the outside and then the licorice on the inside. So I'm a fan of that flavor profile, but it definitely veers in that direction. And so I've said it a couple times, but when you talk about Wild Turkey Kentucky Spirit, where does it fall in their own lineup? I think the reason I struggle with it is it's got that 101 proof, but it's basically triple the price of the Wild Turkey 101. Then you've got a barrel strength offering in rare breed that most people really love and hype up and enjoy. That's $50. And this is more than that. So is the fact that it's a single barrel justifying triple a bottle of Wild Turkey 101? Honestly, I don't think so. Like if I tasted this right up against Wild Turkey 101, maybe another video in the future, I think this is potentially offering a little bit more sophisticated flavors, but I don't know if it's justifying triple the price. In fact, I doubt that. So what I'm going to do now is dig in a little bit more. I'll go back to the Blantons, and we'll come back to the Wild Turkey 101 Kentucky Spirit, sorry. We'll go back to the Wild Turkey Kentucky Spirit one more time, and then we'll really evaluate which way I'd lean today, and then which one I think I would recommend you buy. All right, so let's go back to Blanton's, coming off the Wild Turkey 101, see how it compares. Cheers. Okay, so more vanilla is coming through on the nose now, which is nice. Okay. Yeah. It's just kind of crazy for me because if you've been following the channel for any amount of time, I've had this bottle for probably a year and a half now. I've really struggled to like it. There was kind of a dead wood, funky note. That has really gone away. It's a slight woodiness, and by that I don't mean like an oak, a rich oak. You know, you compare this to something, and it's not fair necessarily, but you compare it to something like Russell's Reserve, even the single barrel, you would compare it to the Russell's Reserve 15, you compare it to even a 1924 from Old Forester. Plenty of oak on that. This has a light wood note, like young wood, but mixes in that creamsicle experience and the honey and a little bit of spice to balance it out and to be very pleasant. So Blanton says grown on me. I really do enjoy the subtle flavors, but subtle is a good word. It's very subtle. You got to kind of dig, really be paying attention to get the flavors that you're looking for. All right, let's go back to the Wild Turkey Kentucky Spirit, and we'll do a final comparison and a final breakdown. Okay, so I have been getting water in between each sip. That's why I'm pausing for a second, and then let's go into the Kentucky Spirit one last time. Cheers. Okay, definitely more brown sugar on the nose now, which is nice. Cheers. Oh man, it's actually really good. So that licorice note toned down for me on that sip. It's coming up on the back end, but the funky oak is all over this thing. The brown sugar is there, slight nuttiness, roasted, really roasty, toasty nut experience on this single barrel for me. That, again, that brown sugar is there though, and the oak, the funky oak is here. It's reminding me a little bit of like a Russell's Reserve single barrel where you get that big oak experience. Doesn't have quite the like cherry pop that I've gotten on a lot of those, but it does have this darker register to it. Just roasty, funky, very interesting, and just a more rounded mouth feel. And I think that 101 proof, as opposed to the Blanton's 93, does give you more oomph to the sip. All right, so we've had both. We've been thinking about both, thinking about particularly the value. If you're gonna go after one of these like slightly harder to find, more limited options from these two massive distilleries, which one would I recommend you spend your money on? I think my final recommendation would be the Wild Turkey Kentucky Spirit. Why is that? One, the proof point's a little higher, a little more oomph in the sip. Two, definitely more findable than Blanton's, and you're not going to necessarily see it marked up at a crazy rate like Blanton's will be. And three, I just think it's a more interesting thing to explore from a distillery, especially if you're a Wild Turkey fan. It's a little bit more interesting. Not as many people talk about it, and therefore it's a little easier to find. But it's just going to add some value to your collection and get you thinking about the single barrel experience from Wild Turkey. All right, everybody, I think that's going to wrap it up. Would love to know in the comments below if you had the option to buy one of these bottles, or you're going to use the effort and the time, and you're about $70 to go out and grab one of these, assuming you can get it for MSRP. Which one would you go after? Just curious. While you're at it, hit the like button on this video. That's what gets it out to the most people. And then if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the Bourbon Hutch. Hopefully you're enjoying the content, and I plan to produce a lot more great content for you in the rest of the year and 2025 and well beyond that as well. Till I see you guys again for another video, all I can say is keep drinking good whiskey and cheers.